for allowing us to do this. Hold on 1 second. Let me turn the record on.
Buenas noches. Good evening. We'll call this meeting to order. Legislation Committee, Board of Alders. I'll read the notice. Legislation Committee, the Board of Alders will meet in person on Tuesday, July 2nd, 2024 at 6 p.m. in the Board of Alders Chamber, located at 165 Church Street, second floor, New Haven, Connecticut, to hear and act on the following items. 1, OR 2023-002 ordinance amendment of the New Haven Board of Alders. Review and approve New Haven Democracy Fund Board approved code of general ordinances for the action only. 2, LM-2022-048 workshop of the New Haven Board of Alders with the New Haven Democracy Fund to discuss proposed changes to the Democracy Fund ordinance. Order Richard Furlow, Vice Chair, and Honorable Mike Mark, City Clerk. These items are from the offices. Orange Street, Room 202, New Haven, Connecticut 06510. Disability limited accommodations. Please call 203-946-7651. Voice or 203-946-8582. TTY TED. Public comment testimony will be submitted via email to public testimony at newhaven.ct.gov 2 p.m. on the day of the meeting. This meeting may be viewed on the New Haven Alders. Thank you, colleagues, for being here this evening. I'll ask if you would please introduce yourself, starting from my
Alder Saldicola.
Alder Carmen Rodriguez, Ward 6.
And I'm Richard Furlow, Ward 27.
Ward 25.
Thank you. So we will hear the first item. We'll ask for the ordinance amendment for the Democracy Fund. Good to have you this evening. Thank you. You could just have your name and address for the record. After you three have introduced yourselves, you will have the floor.
Sure. My name is Alder Carmen. My address is 54 Fifth Street in Haven.
Mr. Rodriguez. My address is 142.
I am the administrator for the New Haven Democracy Fund. I am here with our chair of the board, and the vice chair of the subcommittee on the ordinance revision. Both of these members served many, which I think is in year 8. Year 6. We have presented to you some requested revisions for the ordinance of the New Haven Democracy Fund based on a number of
Alan,
things.
please.
Go ahead.
I just want to bring us to very hard work in funding building to kind of look at sort things and figure out what some of the issues were with it that came up during the course of the past several years that we want to kind of fix and take care of, as well as present to you some options that may be available. But I want to make sure this opportunity right now. Thank you for giving us this opportunity.
Well, I just had some sort of introduction.
Please, go ahead.
Is that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to thank you, the committee as well, and just maybe frame the discussion here tonight with just a few very brief comments. So the Democracy Fund ordinance which amazingly is like 20 years old. It's unusual, maybe unique to the ordinances in that it gets thoroughly stress tested 2 years when we have them. We have candidates kind of probing around the ordinance to see how they can use it to their max. And that stress testing kind of gives us heartburn sometimes because there's sometimes an element of trying to exploit loopholes, force us to make just difficult decisions. But in fact, when that occurs, it's actually the weaknesses and infirmities and ambiguities in the ordinance so that we can clarify the gray area. All the ambiguities and make the program work better in the future for the candidates and more importantly for the public. So the drafters of this ordinance, like 17 years ago, they did absolute best that they could with the information available to them. The ordinance drafted very well. The predecessors they did a remarkable job in creating a system that's resilient and whose high structure remains completely intact today, because that's a really good system. We have data to show that that's working. It's working well. It's meeting, if not all of its goals. And I would urge you to look at the report we commissioned last fall that attempts to kind of pinpoint and quantify with data and analysis the impact of our election. So, and it's no slight to the drafters of the original ordinance to suggest there are certain things that they couldn't have known, at the time, about how it would be used and occasionally abused, and issues that would come up around things like exploratory technological changes like the use of electronic filing. That's why the ordinances needed to be tweaked and updated a few times. This, I think, is the most substantial revision that's ever been undertaken, because revising the ordinance has been done before, and it has to be done again, but hopefully not for a while. So this package of recommendations, which will hold out the details from our administrator, represents really further consultation, not just participated in the democracy fund in recent years, but also consultation with some of the wisdom and institutional memory, and also with other public financing program administrators that we interact with at conferences and listserv, like that, where best practices from around the country are shared and analyzed. So what we're presenting here, sorry, this program of the Democracy Fund is about fundamental principles of voting and democracy in our progressive values as a city, and we have an obligation to get it right. I just want to make, I don't want to make it sound like these changes are simply reactive troubleshooting, like a response to problems that have arisen in the past, rather than attempting to anticipate or prevent problems in the future. I think our response would be that they're very proactive and they look to the future. They try to anticipate what our elections will look like when we transition to 4-year terms in 2027. They try to anticipate that there are possible changes like adding non-municipal races, board of elections for Alder, et cetera, to the program. That's obviously a decision for you, for elected representatives to make, but we are going to recommend taking language that would explicitly prevent those changes from being adopted, because we're trying to be not just reactive, but also forward-looking to provide maximum flexibility going forward. So just last thing, I'm sorry, our former board member, James Pandari Alexander, is not here because he did a lot of work on revisions, but I hope as you hear what we're proposing from our administrator and other board members, who will agree grounded in wisdom, experience, and consultation with a lot of the critical stakeholders.
So let me talk a little bit about the process of how we came up with these changes. As our chair and Aaron both mentioned, every 2 years we do test this program, and we test it to see where it's strongest and where it may have some flaws, and we get constant feedback from the people that use it, both candidates and the treasurers and the donors who contribute to these candidates, and have questions about the process or have questions about the ordinance itself. Every year, complaints, we might get occurrences, and we have to address those by either seeking official counsel and providing a ruling, or holding a or, some kind of public meeting that allows all to come in and speak about how they would like the ideal solution. Part of what we need to change in this ordinance is very basic gender, referring to the mayor as he. It still refers to alders as aldermen. There's always simple things we all agree with that need to be changed in here. And then there are things that are a little bit more complicated and we really need elected leaders to think about it. We want to reform the offices and is that something that is horizon now that we are looking at. The changes that are being made, you have two versions of this, let me state. You have one version that really looks at the nuts and bolts, handles things, that we have gone over a full consultation with, departments in the city, the finance department, and the state about, that really bring this program into line with the current standards, or allows for future standardization by saying, as the state does, for things like contribution minimums and maximums, allowable calculations, timelines for when candidates can, so they're not waiting around waiting as and making it so that there are smaller thresholds for things like donation minimums for the people who only have $5 but want their heard and amplified by the program with a 2-to-1 match. Since the minimum was $10, a pilot 5, it did very, very well and had increased participation. The other thing is that we are changing some of the numbers in here to make the program a little bit more sustainable by cutting back on some of the inflationary increases we had to put in effect because of. So right now the maximum contribution is $5. We want to reset that down to $400. With the program, the maximum is $1,000. I feel like we're really getting close to like halfway, and that kind of goes against the principles of the program, which is that we don't want super large donations to have, oversized impact on who candidates are talking to and what they're choosing to talk about. And so by really making small donations a bigger part of it and reducing the number of $1,000 contributions, it changes who the candidate talks to early on, and that can change the entire platform going forward because the conversations that we're having are going to be about. So that was one of the things that this program has seen be very, very successful, because when you have to raise $5,000 from 200 New Haveners, you have to talk to 200 New Haveners and hear what they care about and hear what they have to say. And so that's one of the other reasons why perhaps this is the time of program expansion, because as we move into this 4-year term, with these offices that are on the ticket might become more competitive as the states become. And so, we want candidates to be able to say, I've gone out and behavioral process a platform that's based on conversations with small leaders as well as people with bigger and deeper pockets. One of the other things that's incredibly important is that we're increasing the 2-to-1 match to $35, and combine that in things change. Originally it was $5 but we're making that into one match. So if somebody donates $35, we have the Democracy Fund gives 70 as a match. Your $35 is now $100 in power. It's $110 in power. Or sorry, $105 in power. And it's there aren't a lot of people in Haven who may care about elections who can give $100 out of their pocket, but we make it possible for them to do that. There's a lot of good government stuff in here, oversight stuff in here. We want the finance to make sure that we're investing money appropriately, and those statements are in here. And we're also making sure that we're with the election commission and the electronic filing system so that when people are filing their financial documents, there's full transparency and accessibility for new havens and anyone else who might be interested exactly who gave dollars, where they came from, under what circumstances, the fundraiser, was it an ad book, and making sure that that information is available when people are making decisions about who to the second version that you have here includes a parameter for the creation of something called the Democracy Fund Pledge, and a program that would extend to non-citywide offices. So that would be the Board of Education and the Board of Health. And what it would basically say is we issue contributions from contractors, companies, from larger political action groups, and you are on time with your financial documents. You will receive a small grant from the Democracy Fund of $1,000. And how you spend that is, as long as it's that you want to spend that just to hire somebody to make sure that your ducks are in a row for your financial filings, that's your prerogative. If you want to spend it on mailers, you can do that. The program was designed after we talked to many alders, many people in the community, past candidates, people who were part of the Democratic and Republican town committee structures, and based on feedback of what we think would be helpful. But of course, if you feel like it needs to be altered and changed, that's your choice. If you feel the dollar amounts are too high or too little, that is up to you, and we absolutely welcome that feedback. We'll be there for your. Are there any questions?
I would the Democracy Fund pledge would obviously be completely voluntary as its participation in the Democracy Fund.
Yes, this is an opt-in program, not an opt-out program. The other thing to keep in mind is that these grants and this money is only available when it's a competitive election. So right now, we don't give out $1 if there's only one candidate who has raised $5,000. So this is money for people who have to get a message out because they're in a competitive election and they need a little bit of assistance. Or they want to make it part of their platform. Look, I care about transparency. I care about knowing where my dollars are coming from and what's behind my voice, and therefore I'm participating. We have seen some people try to politicize the program. We have tried to, address that as a board when it does come up, and we are putting in things here that close some of the loopholes, specifically for exploratory committees, where you can't roll over your funds from exploratory committee into a candidate committee. You have to either spend those dollars down before you decide if you're going to run for office, or you return them to the people who gave you those dollars, or you can return them to the Democracy Fund and start from zero. It was unclear previously how the process worked. We did have some issues with it, and we really hope that you all feel that this language.
Share a little bit about ballot.
Sure. So we have a couple of changes in here that address ballot access. Sometimes there are candidates who think they're running, and don't get the nomination, and then decide not to get the. If you decide halfway through that you're no longer running for office for a personal reason, that's fine. You can actually funds that you raised, because those people who donated that money did so thinking their money was going to be doubled, and we owe it to them to make that sure. But we're not going to give you the grace for running for race if you're not doing it. If you, and that also counts for people who have these campaigns and try to collect signatures and don't get on the ballot. You do have to dot your I's and cross your T's to get public funding. You're allowed to keep the matching money, but again, you cannot keep a $23,000 grant or a $23,000 grant if you don't have ballot access. Additionally, if you get any public money from us, you must participate in a public forum or debate. We require you to answer questions in front of the New Haven audience and have a conversation about what your ideas are, what your plans are, and where you want to take us. And that I think is really fundamental to democracy. People want to know who they're voting for, and they want to make sure that, you know, anybody who's taking public money is getting on the stage and answering some hard questions. You guys have any questions?
We are the only city in Connecticut that.
We are the only city in Connecticut that has a program like this. We are also the only city in the country that has a hybrid program. And that is something to be really, really proud of. You know, the Board of Alders back in 2000 that no one else had really done before, and has proven to work beautifully. You know, it does increase the number of people that are involved in donating to elections. It has increased the range of donations that people get. It's most certainly, if you look at our report that we published last year, you know, a candidate who participates with the Democracy Fund receives 90% of their contributions from New Haveners, as opposed to 60% for non-participating candidates. That's huge, because if you're raising the same amount of money, or you're able to raise more money by just having the people who are going to be the electorate, it you know, it just means that the people that are donating are the people who either benefit or who are your actions. And there's a responsibility there for the elected official that's really, really important to face into. And I think there's a lot of benefit to expanding this program to more offices, to increase the breadth of elected offices that not only can have a little bit more capital to get their messages out there, but also, you know, we might entice people to run who wouldn't have considered it before, who didn't have the wherewithal, you know, but who might be able to go and collect $5 to $10 from their neighbors and have a legitimate reason to run. And again, you know, only if there is a competitive race will any of this money go out from copper. But you know, we're hoping, just like it did with the mayor's race, that over time it always becomes a living for money. Are you a democracy? Are you going to use them? Not using them.
Thank you for your presentation. I'll go to colleagues next. Are there any questions from colleagues? Alderman Marchand.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your presentation, and I just have a few questions. The e-press reporting system, can you say more about why that is a requirement, what benefit it has to candidates and the public to file your campaign paperwork?
Sure. So the e-press system is an online filing system that's run by the state of Connecticut. Right now, all you know, state senators, state representatives, all statewide offices report through that. Basically, it's done away with the paper filing where you're writing out or typing into a for your treasurer to write down all of your documents. Excel spreadsheet will auto-populate your reporting. It's a lot easier to do the diligence of reporting your financial. It also makes those filings non-image-based PDFs, so you can actually sort through them as somebody who might be interested in these political events. As a candidate, now you have a resource. Did my friend donate? Let me check the record of the last filing and make sure that they did. And it allows you to search your own, you know, your own. The other thing is that it automatically aggregates the total of individuals who have donated to you, so that you can make sure that nobody goes over and you get a fine. It creates a system for your treasurer to keep track in a much more modern way than what is currently done now, which is really paper. And it can be extremely burdensome in its current form. Right now, there are 20 municipalities in the state of Connecticut that use this for municipal elections in a pilot program. New Haven was not part of that. We only have this right now for the mayor's race. We're changing this ordinance and creating a democracy component to require that level of transparency. We also require interest in all of those other offices. And that will be a huge benefit in transparency.
Yeah, back on that, Chris, I think it's a win-win for the treasurers. It's much easier for them not having to deal with the actual physical paper. We think it looks work for the town clerk's office. I think it's vastly better, from a transparency perspective for the public to have this disclosure information available in which can be searchable format through the eCRIS database. And we've already been requiring candidates to do the eCRIS filing through our candidate contracts. This is a kind of internal process, but this would establish that by work.
Mhm. So that's all I heard everyone. We can go through all her candidates running with the democracy pledge. Access to eCRIS right now is offered to, 26 are doing it on a pilot basis. It's offered to all municipalities and only some can do it, or those are the only authorized to use
Those
it.
are the only authorized to use it. It was a pilot program that was started by the state, and up to 20, it was first come first.
For a minute, okay.
So I assume it's the Secretary of State's office that controls eCRIS. Was it?
Yes, it's a state election.
Right, okay, SEC.
Yeah.
Okay, so us making it a part of the ordinance, have they agreed to
Yes.
make it? Thank you for that. This is a question I should probably know the answer to, because I've written 7 times using paper and an individual candidate. I've never had access to this program until. But when I talk with my state rep friends, and the elections program, we often talk in terms of number of donations as well as the aggregate amount of those donations.
Right.
Could you refresh my memory about whether or not democracy support depends on number of donations or amount of donations?
It's both. It's the same type of system as the election program, which is the one we were discussing for state rep. We require $5,000 worth of contributions from 200 registered voters. And so, that basically, it is sort of the barometer of students, right? We're not here to help, with candidates who can't be bothered to talk to 200 students, who are trying to run us.
That's right, and you mentioned it. Thank you for clarifying. So if we were to pass version in the democracy budget for the next year.
Yes.
It sounds, based on my of your language here, that those alders who opt into it would get the benefit. They'd have to limit the amount of the donations and who gets to donate to them. I'm wondering about slates, because that's something that a number of colleges do, and as a team, resources. Have you thought about, would this not work with slates? Could it work with slates?
This, as it's laid out, really works with individual candidates. If you are in such a competitive race that you have an opposing candidate who raised $2,500 on a minimum for voters, and Board of Education members to be considered to be tested with. Two people have to have raised $2,500. We assume that a slate that may also serve 29 other wards, right, or 15 half the state, right, 15 other wards, might not be willing to say, well, you have a competitive race, so here's almost all of our money that we've raised, even though candidates A who are unopposed raised, X. The distribution of how money is spent on a slate committee, sometimes we feel very uneven. And slate committees are definitely one, and for the most part, they're used when it's a slate of Democrats versus a slate of Republicans, or it is used when it is a slate of candidates who are unopposed, or not in any way meaningfully opposed. And that's not really who this program is designed for. This is designed for when you have Ward 1 and two candidates who really want the position and they've each raised $2,500 or more. And it's, they need a policy so that people can understand what they care about, what they're talking about. They need to maybe get that message out. And if there's one candidate who's saying, I believe in government, I believe in filing all of my things on time, I believe in dotting my I's and crossing my T's with my paperwork, and I'm using this to show that I can navigate the government system, then you would want a candidate who doesn't. That's something that the voters should know. Knowing where the money comes from is really important part of this free speech conversation. And one of the sections we took out, there was a whole section about, if somebody overspent me, you would match, and that was constitutional, right? Because there are these pockets of conversation about how money is free speech that the Supreme Court cases that we but what we're trying to do is make it so that the smallest amount of money can be the largest amount of speech, and that we are looking to care about showing exactly, and that's really what this is for.
If I could, that's a good question that you posed. I'm sure there is a way to have the democracy apply to slates. It would just require a little bit more drafting.
On most sides that in this, the pledge candidate agrees to limit their contributions to $250, which is the same as what it is now. What you're agreeing to is to not accept $250 from a political action group or a private company, but instead from individuals. That's the only thing. We're not looking for more money because we're not in this pledge program. We're not providing matching funds. We're only providing it grant as a way that we're presenting it to you. You, of course, can alter it however you like. But that was the general sentiment. We're not trying to handicap fundraising. We're simply trying to make sure that it's from individuals, not.
Thank you. And my last question, Mr. Chair, is, first, I saw verification to the enforcement mechanisms in version 1. I believe what I understood from your version 2 is because there's not a lot of enforcement for alder candidates. Is it just the enforcement for the existing program apply to them as well? So essentially, if someone takes the pledge and then takes gifts that go above the thresholds of the program, that candidate would have to return the money.
Yes, they have to return the money. It also makes it very clear that we will put in 2-836 subsection 2 part D. They may not rescind participation. Non-compliance will result in a formal request to return a grant and public notice of such a request. So we're going to make it very clear that we cannot follow.
So it's that public aspect of the request that actually means the money. Although Jeff, they can report, right?
Typically,
Has that even come up in
we have the board I mean, in the 10 years that I've served on the Democracy Fund, and for all the predecessors that have served before me, nobody has ever gone to court over this. Typically, we are able to resolve it and mediate, but either for that candidate committee and the treasurers or between the board and multiple candidates who are having some kind of issue. Anything that's going to be a bigger issue than that is going to fall into the job of state elections enforcement commission.
Mhm.
And if there's an ethical problem, if there's a stealing problem, if there's a corruption issue or something like that, that's a state issue. And it is far above your ability and pay grade to handle. And that needs a full investigation. We just can't unite, and we're not equipped to or financed to that. And so there are certain complaints that have come to us where we've said, we're going to want to take that up with the state. Because, it's not in our group. But once the state does come back, there are parameters. If the state says, candidate A, you did something wrong, then we can say, candidate A, you did something wrong, and under your contract, you have to give us the money back.
It's okay. Done with it. Things to provide the terms.
Yeah.
So you have to take court which contract because it's worked out, perhaps.
We haven't had that issue.
But we could, and we also have a fine, system in place,
right.
of up to $2,000 per incident.
Yeah.
And that is a pretty big deterrent for individuals who are running campaigns because it's just not that much money. And things that.
Well, thank you for those responses. Thank you.
Questions from any members? Okay, I'll ask. I was just reading the definition, trying to get my head around the definition of citywide office. The definition for a citywide campaign is it only has the mayor and city clerk. So just let me know what the thought process is around that. I understand the pilot, but this would have to come back before us again. Are you doing it?
Yes, so what we wanted to do is we wanted to expand the program in a way that you felt was the most reasonable. In version 1, we only extended it to city clerk, which is the only other citywide office that is elected at the same time. There are other citywide offices, like but they're actually elected during presidential election years. And so it would require administration to be done in an off year. That's not necessarily a problem. It's not necessarily something that you can adjust in budget because you do have an administrator who is, hired during the off season as well. But we did make it two separate things. The pilot program addresses the board education at the city, so we did to do that in a citywide office because technically it's only the city who goes elected. Does that clarify? The only thing that we did not address here is judge of probate, and there has really never been a very competitive race for judge of probate, where candidates have raised more than $5,000 to hit that. So we particular office, so that is added.
Get something else. It's not true citywide.
We'd be open to hearing any recommendations that you make kind of changes. So we would also continue to get thoughts out of you as well.
Do you have any want to call it municipal office or? So if you look,
Mr. Chairman, is you thinking about how we add the alders into this particular mix? If they're not citywide,
Yeah, the Board of Ed is not citywide either.
no?
right.
No.
So here's what I will say. Definitions, which I believe is on page 33 of your packet.
Yeah.
there is another sentence in blue that, firstly, the unregistered voters in that version, and we say candidates all as a board of education are not considered we shall keep going under the pledge section. And so there's a lot here that talks about matching funds that would simply not be applicable. That's why we felt that it needed sort of its own thing, because if we're only giving the grant, it's a simpler operation. It does take up a lot less administration. It's still going to get, an audit. There's still going to be, making sure that people file on time. And by the way, if you are using eCRIS, your deadline is no longer 4 p.m. on the date of filing, it's midnight, which for those last minute people might be a lifesaver. But there is in this definition a guidance for those additional offices.
That sounds okay. If that's something that's out.
Is the registrar considered municipal? Not really, right?
Yes, that's a municipal
Yeah, it's a
office.
city
It only
office.
serves the city.
Office. Right, so the city, even though she's in the state. Okay, but that office is in the state.
Well, so is the city clerk in some
Oh,
way.
that's true.
Close to Judge Cronin.
Board of Ed, too.
In a lot of ways, almost all the offices.
I think you can kind of, we were struggling to find what is the term that would just apply to these two citywide and not the others, but I think that's why you have a definition section. The benefit of that is, I think as lawyers will tell you, is you can define the terms however you want.
Not as much as you'd think. Even if you had, all 30 alder races contested above our contested amount, and, each one of them qualify for the grant, that's only going to be 120,000, which is less than one candidate's maximum contribution to the match. So it would only be like another minute. So, and the likelihood of that, all 30 seats being contested and both sides choosing to participate in the fund is so unlikely based on past, how many contested races we do have in the city.
So it goes for your turn.
Well, yeah, I mean, but that's the thing. Like, we also want to prepare for that 4-year term where things do get more competitive, and where messaging really matters, because now you want to make sure that the person that you're electing, what they stand for 4 years, right? Making sure that sitting holders, new people that are interested in getting involved and get that message out is really paramount to making sure that our new 4-year terms work. Because you don't want, something to happen where somebody's coming in and every year, maybe they're resigning because they get pushback on something that they thought they made a very obvious part of their campaign or candidacy. Like there's so many things that come up, in some holders. We have had turnover. We have had people that are, looking to, who are surprised once they get into office. They weren't adequately talking to enough people before they got in here, and realized that what they ran on needed, or what they were running on wasn't clear enough. And they're surprised by that first term, right? When they're freshman officials, and it's a culture shock, right? Like you might be really gung ho. And so we want to make sure that those people are adequately prepared. And one of the ways to do that is to talk to as many people as you can, ensure that you are fully informed.
I can just say, the turnover for all the, it's not as big as some news has made it.
Yeah.
At all. There's 30. And the turnover is very, very small in consideration. I mean, those that have not. You finish a term and then move on, that's the thing. To finish. So, anyways.
No, and I absolutely appreciate that. And it's not meant to be in any way, anything, I'm not trying to say anything other than when you have a limited amount of time, and a limited amount of minutes to get your message out. It's important to make sure that you're maximizing your ability to do so, because there's a lot of in a municipal election where it's really hard for candidates to get out. Maybe that extra $1,000 reaches their Facebook community, or reaches, puts their face on a bus with, the three sayings that matter most to them, or maybe it hires the door knockers that they needed to, for people from their community who really could have used $100 for the community right, to get a message out there, to do some door knockers for people.
Colleagues, have any other questions?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Great.
Thank you. How much funding does the Democracy Fund have currently?
About $300,000. We do make an annual request. Between each election cycle, we request $150,000. We have been able to receive that amount for the last 6 years. Thank you.
We've invested.
We since I became administrator and since we became board chair, we have made it a priority. That money that we have is losing interest. So that's very, very important to us, and we wanted to make sure that that was also included in the draft here, that it had to be interest bearing, and that, the Department of Finance had to be okay with how we do that.
Interest bearing, FDIC.
Right, of course. Modest games.
Games. Other ways to bring it in.
We have tried to see if there are other sources of income for the program like this. And when we went to some of the other, so I've been to a couple of different conferences where there are a lot of public campaign Mr. Good, and some of our board members are going to be going to the national cities this year, and we're hoping to talk to a lot of people who operate in and one of the things that we have learned by talking to people who operate these programs at all levels, state, municipal, is that all of their funding comes from the government. None of it is private. There are opportunities perhaps to have corporate backing or to have, a big donor back, and it's very complicated tax-wise, it's very complicated for the city, and so it has been something we avoided, and we continue to avoid in these drafts. Just to make it, but if you guys want to open that up, we accept.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Before I ask the second question, you answered it, so thank you.
Any other questions? Members, I just have one other quick one. I'll just say what page it's on, just page 39. And B, the board shall be empowered, you added in to resolve disputes over interpretation of the ordinance and to adopt and publish regulations to do just a thought. I'm just wondering, would you want to do this among yourselves, or is this going to be referred to council, just the way this is written?
So right now, in the past, the person who has been the administrator for the board has been a lawyer. In the time that I have served, I am not a lawyer. So I'm not able to write formal legal rulings on certain things. And that has been required. We have, as not corporation counsel, we may work for a mayor who may or may not be someone who's bringing against another candidate through the democracy, but our own lawyer to do it independently. This also is a section if we want to create a more formal and coherent process. Because right now, what might happen, and has happened is someone will text me at 10:30 at night and have a concern. And I say, can you please write me an email? And they will write me an email like, I have a concern, please tell the board. And I say, okay, well, if you look at our bylaws, I need to know like what part of the ordinance you think they're violating in order for me to board. And I need to write it. Will you want me to mail you a letter? And I'm like, no, you can write me an email. When you try, and you're like, well, I'm like, okay. And we go back and forth about this, about the process of making the complaint, which is the more something has gone wrong and something has been tried and it needs to be addressed. And there are differences of interpretation between two campaigns or between a treasurer and a candidate on the same campaign, which is also happening. The board can come in and say, this is how we feel about this. This is how we're voting as a board. The interpretation is for this. And now we use that interpretation moving forward for everyone. And a lot of times, like we said, every 2 years, this gets tested. And each year, I tell you, Sergio, this every year, I am shocked that more loopholes or more crazy details have been picked apart to find something that wasn't quite clear enough, and so someone made a mistake, their interpretation, and unintentionally is now in trouble. I began with where that never happened because this program should be easy to use. It should not be a barrier to participation to be participating. It really should be something that people are proud to participate in, that they opt into participating. And part of that is resolving these disputes that could be extremely public, private, or at least between the individuals involved before it becomes some kind of public spectacle before an election.
Did that answer your question?
I'm just a little concerned at how it reads.
Okay.
Because you're not always going to be on the board. And so we always try to think in advance. The board shall be empowered and that will resolve, empowered and resolved. Very strong. I'm just wondering, through a legal opinion, and you don't have,
Right.
so it's funny because we wrote the CRP. There's a course that we knew what we were talking about when we wrote it, and so we can certainly interpret it and make adjustments. We're not hearing it all. And then it goes back in the courts as well. What that means, I mean, to have a legal insight. And so I just want to know the process of using the word empowered to resolve. That's like it stops, like the buck stops with the board.
Well, in certain situations, the bug does stop. The argument, okay, you have to come up, but we said, but we need something more than just this. And it's kind of late. In our regulation document. So there are some areas some of that is spelled out for us. But the board does need the to make a decision on its own.
I'm not pushing back.
No,
I would also say very specifically, in 2017, we did hire a lawyer to do an interpretation because two of the individuals that were running for office had different interpretations of how much maximization unclear. And as a result, there was a difference between the way different administrators were operating the fund because the administrators were interpreting the ordinance. But what we did was we hired the board chose to hire a lawyer. And that lawyer did a legal reading of the document. We had a public forum where all of the participating guests and non-participating guests and members of the public were able to come to us and listen to what everyone had to say. And the lawyer was sitting right there. And then the lawyer took 2 weeks and came back with a ruling. And that is a ruling that we operated by. We feel like it made sense. And what that basically has done has increased the matching funds that the candidate gets by about $20,000 per cycle, which is not how I was reading the ordinance. I was not reading that the matching funds you use, the contributions that you're using to qualify for the grant also get matched to the fund, but it was how a lawyer read it. And so I'm going to go with what that is. And so this gave us the opportunity to as it sits without position, to go and hire counsel, to go and vote on. But this basically makes it clear that we're not just empowered to adopt and enforce regulations, but we're allowed to then, when people agree, to create a system where we resolve this.
This authority resolving was already in the ordinance. It was assigned to the administrator. And I think you're just doing a little rebalancing and saying that this implicit authority now resides in was by the mayor or by the board of health rather than the administrator. That was appropriate.
We have done that through that. We have diminished the role of the administrator a little bit, because if we are going to add more responsibility for that individual, then there are other things that the board has to do. And some of this, making sure that we resolve those interpretations is something that perhaps the board is totally completely equipped to do, whereas an administrator should be the trainings of candidates and the communications with candidates.
Great. Okay.
We also want to thank our other board members who are here. Sarah Fika and Leslie Huffenberg are our other board members who are in attendance. And
Did you guys want to say anything?
Well,
they have, I think they have public testimony. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Any other questions from the members? No? Public portion. Thank you for your question.
Thank you. Appreciate you guys.
We'll call this coming with the infamous list.
The graphic report.
Thank you.
Leslie Kathleen McGurk.
Okay, we'll start with Leslie, please. Sure, come on now. Have a seat in front of any of these microphones, and please give us your name. We're going to be moving quickly. We know there's enough people. We don't typically try not to do this. But here we are.
Okay,
And,
I'll go quick.
Yeah. Well, no, so I want to say first, that what you have to say is important to us. And so we're not going to rush your testimony. We want to hear from you. I'm just notifying our other folks that you have another meeting after this one. Another meeting when we're finished here.
Great. Okay, my name is Leslie Huffel-McGurk, and I'm 942 Elm Street. So I am a volunteer board member for the New Haven Democracy Fund. I'm very happy to be here today to support the proposed changes to the Democracy Fund ordinance. I've only been on the board for a year, so I missed all of the work that went into the ordinance, collecting feedback from the community and workshopping solutions to problems that I was in operating for the first decade or so. What I have witnessed is extraordinary care that the board and the administrator put into any decision involving the fund. They are always guided by integrity to our mission, organizational sustainability, and wherever possible to improve participation. Our proposed changes would benefit candidates by enhancing the clarity of the language, allowing them to earn matching funds, and by closing unintentional loopholes that undermine the intention of leveling the financial playing field. The changes will also help us manage the by allowing more board oversight, increasing transparency about the rules, and aligning more with the state election commission's dates and development. They're smaller changes, but they will help us fulfill our mission in the future. And then I just also want to say, regarding the pilot program, I didn't think about before, is that I think that there's so much value that the fund has created, even just with the fundraising that it's involved in so far, in terms of participation, increasing democracy in New Haven. That, I personally think expanding it to more offices would be great, although you recognize it comes with some additional administration and funding. It would be definitely a growth situation. Great for our city.
Thank you, appreciate it. Any questions from the committee?
Thank you.
For your testimony. We have next, Sarah Pika. Pika, that's right the first time.
It's a rare attempt. Thank you.
Early, you can have your name and the
Pika, 120 Worcester Street, New Haven, and thank you all, honorable alders. Really appreciate you considering this change. Leslie and I were both brought on at the same time, so I too was new. I missed all of the work that went into this. But despite that, I really felt like we were included. We made sure to ask us if we agreed with the language. Even when all of that work had been done, some new issues came up, we were engaged to do a protocol committee to make sure that we were happy with the language as it was. We ultimately decided can't really write for every possible circumstance. There will always be something that you can't predict. But I'm very happy with this, how it's written. And I do think that, that being said, our board is bipartisan. We get along well. And I think that making sure that that continues is important because you cannot write for every circumstance. You can't predict how different candidates are going to be edges or what holes we have been anticipated. So having a good board that gets along and can discuss these things and come to decisions. Because you could rewrite this and still never anticipate all of this. So this, I feel like we were engaged. There's been a big effort to get consensus across party lines for everyone to agree. That effort means a lot.
Thank you for your testimony. Colleagues have any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you again. Thanks for coming. For serving on the board.
Oh, you're very.
Anyone else for the public wishing to testify in this matter? Anyone else for the public wishing to testify on this item? For the third time, public wishing to testify on this item, seeing none. Alderman Hand.
Mr. Chair, I move that we close the public announcement.
Second.
And moving seconded, any discussion on closing the public portion of this meeting? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, any abstaining? The ayes have it. Is there a motion? Oh, nope, we're going to committee action. Very quickly, yes. Alderman Hand.
Mr. Chair, I move that we read and file item 2.
Been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Alderman Hand.
Mr. Chair, I urge colleagues to vote in favor of this motion. The item is a request for a workshop, which this committee fulfills. That's another appropriate action is for the item to be read. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Alderman Hand, any further discussion? And I'll just note that we've had a very vibrant discussion during the first part of this meeting, dealing with the ordinance amendment. And so it seems reasonable not to have another workshop on it. All in favor of giving this a favorable, moving this to the board to read and file, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed and abstaining? The ayes have it. Okay, Alderman Hand.
Mr. Chair, it's my humble opinion that item one is very substantial and there's different options. I'm more comfortable voting yes on version one. I feel like I would need more thought to come to a clear, strong opinion on item version two, which is the expansion of the program. And, you know, the municipal cycles next year. So I'm not sure that we should just, unless we're ready to say that we're not interested in the version two. But if we're ready to say that, then we can say that. But I, for myself, think it's worth giving version two a little bit more thought and possibly have a public hearing on this matter. And if that's what colleagues think we should do, then we could not take action on this item tonight, schedule it for any time. But if colleagues feel ready to move, I feel comfortable supporting version one, which I think makes sensible improvements. And, so I'm ready to make a motion, but I'm kind of looking to colleagues to see what they feel comfortable with.
Thank you, Alderman Marchand. Further discussion? Alder DeCola.
I'm feeling that version one is a step in that direction. Two is very easy and more to think about. And it doesn't really become more of a weight issue until the next cycle, 27, when everything turns 4-year terms. So I'm kind of going with the suggestion of Adam that I feel the same way, version one, that I would go to if we choose to go.
That's actually what is before us because we have an amendment by substitution. The second one, so item first amendment is before us this evening. Any further discussion?
I guess I should make a motion because you pretty much discussed as much as you should without a motion. Mr. Chair, I move item one.
Second.
I've been moved in second. Is there a,
Mr. Chair, according to our packet, what was originally submitted to this body was a typo. And so I move to amend by substitution, which would be version one.
have been moved in second? Further discussion? Alderman Marchand.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know the makers of this ordinance amendment were keen to get the item on the agenda, so they submitted the request to the Board of Alders before they had completed the drafting of the amendment. But then that language came to us, which is version one, and it was later further revised. And so I think it's totally appropriate to move this to make this amendment by substitution because version one is a good reflection of the original revision of the ordinance that the makers are proposing. And I encourage colleagues to vote in favor of this motion to amend by substitution. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for the discussion. Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, we are giving this a favorable recommend. Oh, no, you just amended by substitution, so we are back to the item as Alderman Marchand.
Mr. Chair, I'm going to encourage colleagues to vote yes on this motion, which is now amended by substitution. I commend the members of the Democracy Fund Board, the attorney they worked with, to look for ways to improve the language of the ordinance, to strengthen the accountabilities, to bring deadlines in line with the SEC deadlines, to deal with the gender pronoun issue. And I think version two is going to be worth our consideration. And that could be submitted at another time. But I think at this time, what we should do is definitely support the kind of course correction that the board in its experience has recommended, and encourage colleagues to vote yes to vote in favor of Maryland's act. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any further discussion? I would like to thank the committee for all the work that they've done of the board, Democracy Board. This was a lot of work. And I am looking forward to them coming back and discussing the second set of revisions as we're moving forward into our 4-year term, the expansion of possibly adding more into the citywide. I think it's a move in the right direction for that conversation. Okay, all in favor of this item as amended, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Say nay. We'll give this a favorable recommendation to the board.
Mr. Chair, I move we adjourn.
Second.
Move to seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we will take 10 minutes and then we will begin our next set of meetings.